Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Tepper. Thank you so much for joining the digital manufacturing panel. I am so excited to have the panelists we have here. I hope that you are able to see the startup showcase we had earlier today, where we had 70 companies doing quick pitches to you. Great example of the startups that we have in our ecosystem and how I got so excited by it, about that intersection of the startup ecosystem and corporate growth is what we all get really excited about. And I know that my panelists get excited about it as well. So today we have an awesome set of panelists coming at digital manufacturing from a few different vectors. We have some folks who are implementing digital manufacturing in the corporate setting. We have a VC investor, and we have someone who started an incredible startup in the space. So we are going to go broad and we are going to go deep on this really exciting topic. I'll take a moment. Let's go around the horn, introduce ourselves, who you are, where you hail from, and which company you represent. So let's start top left with you, Kevin.
Yeah, so Kevin Nolan. I'm here in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm the CEO of G Appliances.
Okay, my turn?
Yes,
okay.
Please.
Hi, I'm Omar Hansbal. I'm the CEO of Bright Machines, based out here in San Francisco, California.
I'm Karen Carr. I'm the founder and managing director of the Exposition Ventures, and I'm based in Chicago.
Hello, everybody. I'm Deepika Batra-Dejovne. I'm the VP of Digital Applications and Connected Factory at Dover Corporation. It's a global manufacturing firm of engineered products, and really excited to be here.
And I'm Alex Tepper. I run industry solutions at Techstars, where we harness the power of the Techstars network to help our founders and corporates drive growth for both entrepreneurs and the corporate side. So very excited to have you all here. Let's start off with a definition. So when we talk about digital manufacturing, how would you all define, in your mind, what does digital manufacturing mean for you? Let's keep going. Let's start with top left again with you, Kevin.
Yeah, so if I think of it, Alex, I think we got to be careful with digital manufacturing, because it's really the whole digital, from a design to supply chain to the consumer, right? And how we tie all that together digitally. So I think digital manufacturing is really a part of this total solution that you're starting to see evolve.
I agree with Kevin. I think it's a fabric or sort of infrastructure for tying all the various parts of a manufacturing operation together. I mean, the classic definition is you apply computer systems to a particular problem set, right? When you say you're doing digital, whatever, e-commerce, your digital it's the application of computer systems. But I mean, in the modern era, the definition of what is a computer system has really expanded beyond PCs, laptops, servers to, you have IoT, you have new, vision technology. So there's just the explosion of ways in which you can sense and shape the real world has really expanded. So it makes the definition a little bit broader than, when you just say computer systems. And I don't know what a better way to say it is, but I agree with Kevin that if you start with the problem statement, what you're really trying to do is just find modern technologies to make manufacturing operations more efficient and customer friendly.
Thank you. Karen?
So, Alex, when we were talking backstage, we said we were going to say, yeah, whatever Kevin said. And I think that's going to turn out to be true, because he nailed it. I think I would add to his look at really that whole value chain. And he talked about, what's happening inside the factory and on the R&D side of supply chain, logistics, and the customer. I would just also add, there's a huge component to this that's enabling the workforce. And then if I think about my vision, it really is about what Amar was talking about in terms of a computer system. And I think about it as like, how do we get to truly cloud-based manufacturing where it's dispatchable, like compute is dispatchable in the cloud? And what are all of the things that the technologies and systems that enable that? So you're starting to see some of that on some of the healthcare testing side. You certainly see that in cloud compute. And I think there's a long-term a possibility to do that in manufacturing, and there's certainly some startups that are trying to do it.
I would agree with all of those thoughts. And I would think of this as sort of a layered evolution of digital manufacturing, starting with how do we get first connected so we're extracting all the data that we want to for manufacturing optimization. How do we then look at harnessing that data in an insightful way? And how do we look at data not in just a silo, but in the full value chain that's a connected digital thread, as that we used to call it, to truly have a brilliant factory or a smart factory, depending on whether you're a GE or a Siemens, to how do you really look at a whole smart operation? Because at the end of the day, it's all about the impact. And the impact that the companies endeavor to have through digital manufacturing is to be able to enable more adaptive and more agile manufacturing cycles that allow you to do lower run, smaller SKU models to more customized models to micro products, which is where the economy is headed, to obviously for every single company that has shareholders, drive greater productivity for what we produce and how we produce, to really new opportunities and business models of what we produce and how we produce. So it's all of that, and it really is a layered evolution.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm glad that the start was with Kevin was good, because we all piggybacked off the back of that. That was helpful. So roughly a shared vision across the five of you, which is fantastic. Let's Deepika, let's start with you. So that's a great vision. Where are you at Dover in terms of the sort of journey towards that master vision?
We are very excited about making this digital journey at Dover. We started this transformation, and there are various pieces that we're in the process of implementing, starting with getting some of our factories connected using one of the startups in the space to start to pull all the data using IoT edge devices and start really see our OEE baseline and then start to enhance it and go to more predictive maintenance. So that's the evolution with the kind of doing that in certain factories. We're looking at AGVs and really building some smart factories, and we have one factory in Richmond, Virginia, that we're doing that at. We also have some of the other companies. Dover is 18 different companies making from engineered robotic arms to garbage trucks and various aspects of the vehicle industry as well. And one of our companies that makes couplers, Kohler products, actually we're partnering with Bright Machines to even have a smart factory model that our team enables. So various aspects of it. Our goal is, and we're also looking at other technologies like 5G and such to see how do we really start to build a factory of the future model, or call it a lighthouse model, where we truly create what the best in class looks like and then scale it.
That's great. Thank you. And Kevin, I've known you for years. I know you've been this has been a long journey for you, continuing to evolve the way that GE Appliances does manufacturing. I'd love to get your thoughts on where you are in that journey, what you've learned over the course of X number of years, thinking about this space and being really progressive in adopting these new technologies.
Yeah, so it's much what we've heard. There's a huge investment in U.S. manufacturing. So if you see GE Appliances, we're really doubling down on, getting close to our customers and manufacturing where our customers are. To the point, experimentation with micro factories. I know you were involved in some of that before, Alex. So we keep looking at, is the future dream, do we really need to have these massive factories, or can you be more local with with where your users are? But the thing that's excited me the most lately is what we're working on, really from a design standpoint of starting with machine readable drawings. And it is unreal what we're unlocking by having machines be able to look at the fundamental designs. And then that just is carrying through our whole supply chain. So you see things automated, designed for cost, designed for value. All of a sudden you get this, the power of computing that is really starting to automate a lot of the back end jobs. So, at Appliances, you'll still see, the assembly is assembly. We've automated a lot of robotics are going into our facility, but the automation I see outside the factory is just phenomenal. And it really starts with having that digital fingerprint, that machine readable language that you can start, whether you're tooling, whether you're supply chain, everything, we have one source of truth. That used to be paper drawings that has evolved now into things that the computer can read better than a human.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You hit on two things there: the design for digital and the localization. And Amar, it occurs to me that Bright Machines, you have both of those hit on your value prop. If I'm not mistaken, would love to get your thoughts on both of those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, our company was founded. I mean, you look at our name, Bright Machines is all about giving eyes and brains to machines. That's really where, and the idea here is to take cutting edge technology and go solve some difficult manufacturing problems. The first problem we've taken on is automating assemblies. So trying and going to those places where either because of cycle time or other economic reasons, it's been really not practical to deploy assembly automation. And we've been, through our software and hardware approach, really trying to change that. And when you start doing that, one of the side benefits of coming up with a very fast, economical, and flexible way of doing assemblies is our customers can now build, as to use Kevin's expression, build where they sell. So we're engaged with a number of customers right now who have been looking to move operations from China, from Malaysia, from other parts of the world closer to the United States and Europe to be able to, build where they sell for meeting customer demand, do shorter run manufacturing, as Deepika was saying, as well as have higher clock speed in terms of collaboration with engineering teams, right? You can really move more quickly in that regard. And so I do think, and there's also the side benefit of sustainability. If you are building closer to your customers, you're not putting things on ships for 21 days or, so there's lots of benefits you realize as you start adopting a more modern approach. And for us as a young company, I think really what we've been focused on is trying to work with customers and understand what they need. And, Deepika and team have been at Dover and companies like them have been very helpful for us to understand. There's always, when you're a technology company, you can get all tied up on the technology. Yeah, this is amazing thing we're doing. Look at this robot. Look at this vision system. But the reality of manufacturing is it's very practical. Here and now, do this. Here's the OEE. Here's the yield. You can come in and so I think it's great for us to be grounded in the reality, even though our aspiration is to enable big things. There's also the reality of the here and now. So I think, our journey has really been about bridging the here and now while keeping sight on really what we're trying to enable long term, which is all of the things the secular shift manufacturing is trying to get to, using data to improve product, localized manufacturing, short run manufacturing, to enable all of that. But, really starting to prove that the technology can do the hard work that human beings have been doing all this while.
Yeah, it's really interesting. People have been saying that COVID has been sort of an accelerant for existing trends. I'd love to get your perspective on that, because it occurs to me localization of manufacturing, localization of supply chain, et cetera, maybe something that's accelerated in these, both tough economic times as well as is related to COVID. So I'd love to get your thoughts on if this has changed your thinking, either from the corporate, the venture, or the startup side.
Are you asking Karen or me?
General, for the whole panel, whoever.
The whole panel. Okay. Yeah. I'll start the response to this. I mean, definitely, we've seen the pandemic create a inflection point. So people have been sort of thinking about adoption of these technologies, and now it's moved it into the front and center of the discussion. I think whichever way you look at it, people do not want to be in a position where they can't get into their physical factories anymore, or they can't. They're so reliant on human beings, and they need to reduce this is a slightly dystopian expression, but I don't have any other way to say it. They have to reduce the density of human beings in the factory, and so I think the pandemic highlighted a number of issues. I think at least from the vantage point we've seen massive acceleration, probably 3x of what we were expecting in the last 12 months.
What about you, Deepika?
So in our case, I would say there is definitely an impact in terms of acceleration from COVID in multiple industrial segments. For obviously everybody's at the grocery store, so everything we sell for machines and products that enable the food industry, we've seen an uptick, and therefore the desire for our companies, therefore, accelerate their ability to manufacture products and not just wait for the next offshore opportunity, but really manufactured here and build greater automation in our plants has absolutely accelerated. We also, through companies like Markham Image, do provide track and trace capability for other companies that manufacture, not just us manufacturing inside. So deploying those capabilities, we've definitely seen a greater desire in the industry to adopt those capabilities across any industry you would think about. And internally, I would say that the desire for some of the companies to use machine vision for quality inspection and desire to accelerate that has been great too. But the shift of business models is beyond manufacturing, and manufacturing benefits from that is the commercial side. The whole B2B digitization in terms of the commercial transactions has just gone through the roof. And McKinsey had a statistic, 250% increase in digitization of B2B commercial transactions, and we're seeing it. We're absolutely seeing it.
Any other thoughts on this from you, Kevin or Karen?
I'd say, go ahead, Kevin, because you're going to talk from the factory side, and then I'll give my cynical approach.
Yeah. So, I think COVID, I don't know if it's progressed things rather than it's exposed things. So I think the complexity of supply chain, before I think there was inventory in the system, whether it was on your procurement or on your distribution, that kind of, covered up a lot of sins. And now that inventory has been pulled away, I think it's an amazing time to really analyze and understand your supply chain. We all talk about lean and turns, but now everyone's forced into running operations without inventory. And it just shows the importance of information, the importance of connectivity, the importance of tracking and tracing and know where everything is. So I think COVID is making people showing the payback and the investment in these kind of analytical tools you're going to need to really run an efficient supply chain. So I think if we can all take this COVID as a true learning experience, we'll come out much better on the other side.
Yeah, I would agree with Kevin that I think it's accelerated maybe the need for digitization. I'm not sure that it's accelerated the localization, but I do think it's been interesting to look at how, in response to critical needs, companies have shown an ability or somewhat of an ability to be flexible and to change manufacturing and to shift it to maybe needed goods in this pandemic. If we think about the Defense Production Act and that sort of thing, a bunch of places are trying to make ventilators or masks or what have you, and that required some fundamental shift. It was interesting for me to listen to Deepika and to Kevin at the beginning talking about where they were, because we've been in what are we talking about, Industry 4.0 for a decade, right? We have been, right? That term was coined a decade ago, and Deepika talked about, well, we're getting our factories connected. So that's just there at the very beginning. And Kevin is maybe, he said, hey, look, we're taking our paper designs for things that we've had a long time ago, and we're learning how to repurpose that, use that in a digital reading. And I look forward to when there are no more paper designs, Kevin. You're doing all of that stuff, natively, digitally, but you still have to kind of do that transition. So I think what we've heard from the leading manufacturers that we're just in the really very beginning of this space. Now, Alex, you and I have worked together and invested in this space for a couple of, maybe half a decade now, and it's interesting to see where we are. So version 1.0, people are talking about, hey, let's get the machines connected. Then we knew that there were some university professors working on AI and ML, but then we realized that you actually, once you got the data, you needed to have data models to enable this kind of predictive analytics. But we didn't have those data models, or at least the people who were doing the AI and the ML, they didn't know anything about manufacturing. And so a lot of those models had to be bespoke. Now I think we're getting into a phase where we're combining folks with backgrounds like Kevin, who understand what the workflows are in factories, and we're able to, you have a new set of companies that have data models for your manufacturing data, and then you can apply whatever AI or ML that you want to it. And I think that's kind of an interesting a trend, because as long as this stays the realm of, I got to get McKinsey in here or PwC in here or Bain in here to be able to do anything, we're not going to do too much, quite frankly. So I think one of the trends that I'm most excited about now is we're seeing a whole host of low code and no code tools come into place now that you have these data models to enable, the folks on Kevin's team to be able to leverage it to do what they need to do. And they don't need to go get Deepika's team. Deepika's team is, kind of says, hey, this is the data model for the enterprise. But now the people in the factory can leverage that with a set of interesting low code and no code tools. So that's one area that I'm particularly excited about. And I think, you see companies like a Site Machine that's long been on data models for manufacturing, or a High Byte that's also really enabling folks to create these models that they can then do their analytics on.
And those models would presumably work for both older factories as well as newer factories. That's a big part of the challenge, I would imagine. As someone said in an earlier session, Stanley Black & Decker, I'm sure it's with GE as well, you have dozens, if not hundreds, of factories that you ideally would bring online into sort of a common data model of some kind. So I'd be interested to see, from your perspective, Karen, are the startups focused on that layer that brings it all together? Are they focused on bringing the older assets online, or focused on building, newer connected factories?
Yeah. I mean, I think the reality is nobody's going to ditch the infrastructure that they already have, right? So we do need to be able to get those older factories that are an important part of the fleet online. I mean, I'm a GE alum myself, and I remember, back in the early days, we did this whole exercise at GE, which is, which machines do we need to try to figure out how to get online? Which machines are already natively online, and which machines are just not going to cut it, right? So we're certainly, I think most companies are through that. I hope most companies are through that. And now I think newer machines already come with some native connectivity. So now that we're getting the older ones online, marrying that with data from new machines, because I don't think we're going to have rip and replace. That's not going to happen. You have to be able to integrate your existing factory. So I think the startups recognize that. So it's a yes and.
Yeah.
One other thing, Alex, I'll just throw in there that I think is a benefit from COVID that's good for startups and everyone is the speed at which people have learned they can operate at, and the change we can make. So anyone that kept to an annual plan is like a dinosaur now, right? Because the world changed so quickly. We've learned we can spin up capacity, we can spin up new designs at a rate where, before we might have a process where you have to keep going through checkpoints, and you didn't really rely on the digital assets you have, but now you're making decisions digitally that you can go implement quickly. So I think companies that are successful through this are going to have a much higher appetite for being more progressive and moving quicker and modernizing, and hopefully not the rate that we've been seeing in the past, Karen.
I would echo that completely. In fact, we no longer need to spend T&L to get everybody in the same room to have a workshop. We are running them virtually. We have been able to connect machines with just the person on site and doing virtual instructions to them versus somebody having to travel. So the speed of really making things happen and making them happen virtually, which was less common before, is definitely happening. Definitely the network devices are in demand, because as much as we'd like all our machines to be connected and network to be in the right shape, it not always is. And those network devices are in high demand. So it's the big lead we're facing right now, but everything else is getting accelerated.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's come back to what a couple of you mentioned on workforce, and especially when you think about the vision all the way from materials to supply chain to manufacturing itself to logistics on the back end, and having that connective, digital connective tissue throughout, that has big implications on skill sets within your various companies. So I'd love to get anyone's perspective on what are those implications? How is sort of the workforce adapting? How are you guys approaching training and hiring differently?
I can take a stab at that. Where I see the change really happening is in the back office, right, in the knowledge work, because you don't need manipulators. You don't, automation on a factory floor. It's difficult. It's expensive. It's happening, but the automation I think that's really starting to happen is kind of what I talked about before. I mean, you've got design work where now I can literally draw a model, push a button, see all the manufacturing operations, all the costing done. That used to take a lot of people and a lot of work, and it's all been automated. So I think this back-end automation is going to have profound impact. And then what's the skill set coming into the workforce, right? And our educators really ready for what we need from, the next 10 years of a workforce? I don't know that yet. I think we're still educating like for the 1980s and not for where we're going in the 2020s.
So I'll give a perspective from the sidelines, and I think there's good news and bad news. Let's start with the bad news first, which is like, look, I think there is a disruption coming. The more automation becomes economical, fast, and flexible, much of what is being done on the factory floor by humans today will get replaced by more and more by machines. I mean, today you go into a factory, you'll find somebody putting in screws 1,000 times a day, and I don't think that's going to be the case 3 years from now. You just watch machines do all of that for you. That's the bad news. The good news is we've seen this movie before in other industries and in other situations, right? We've seen, and the big examples, you can always say the ATM or, like, look, I don't think just the fact that something gets automated means human beings lose their job. The jobs get redefined. And certainly maybe one of the bigger examples that we've seen is like in the agriculture industry. When you go to a farm today in the United States, it's huge amounts of automation there. And it isn't like, in some ways, sometimes there's more demand for more products, and you still need human beings to do all of the more difficult things that are involved. And I think in our case, what we've been watching with the customers we've been engaged with is there is a redefinition of the job to be a little bit more from doing the mechanical, hey, insert 1,000 screws a time, to supervising a bunch of lines, to even working more closely with end customers or engineering people to drive a better manufacturing result, right? And I think there's some, if I was thinking about in Asia, I think I would be using the term that, people went from farm to factory, and now they're going from factory to front office. And that's going to start becoming more and more of the case going forward. But it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen without intention and investment and effort. Otherwise, people are going to get hurt in the process, and that's not right.
Yeah, I think you're both. I think you're both right, and two very interesting, but maybe slightly different points, right? Kevin, I think, makes the point that automation is not just robots replacing people on factories. This whole robotic process automation is impacting what's happening in the white collar jobs as well. Mm-hmm. And that's also a part of making this a more efficient system. And Amar is also, look, I've gone to some of these lights out factories, and I've never been to one that didn't have some people in it. So, because robots are just not that dexterous. There's always going to be, who knows, maybe in a while it will be. They're getting there, but still, you need machine tending, you need some supervision, so there's always going to be a role for that. But I think you can also flip it, because what happened, and I'll take the garment industry and clothing manufacturing. There was a lot of that going on in the North Carolinas or whatever. And then wage got too high for that to be done effectively here, ship all that stuff to China. Now with automated looms, that's coming back to the US. So I think, as we think about more distributed manufacturing, more localized manufacturing, automation, I think is going to be a key driver and what is going to allow some of that manufacturing to be localized. So, that's, I'm actually bullish on it for that reason.
Yep.
And safer.
The other thing, Karen, I think falls into it is customers, we have this philosophy at our company of zero distance, right? We want to make the product that's just for you. So I think there's this point where the end thing, I believe we're going to have humans on the final assembly line for a long time because there's a benefit of changeover and flexibility to really satisfy customers in a much more meaningful and different way. So I keep thinking that the farther you get away from final assembly, the more automation we're going to see. But where that real value conversion happens, there is payback for having that kind of dexterity and customization.
I agreed. And then there's a big thing just about augmenting the worker too. I mean, it's not about replacing them. It's really enabling them to do their job. And that's what you see with RPA. That's what you're seeing with a lot of these tools and even newfangled tools like AR and VR. Sorry, Deepika.
No worries, Karen. I 100% agree. It does augment the capabilities, and that's what we're finding as we're enabling some of our factories to get connected and have better visibility to their OEE. They appreciate that because that enables them to do their job better. That enables them to drive productivity. And some of the factories that have quality issues they want to solve, having greater visibility, machine vision, learning to allow for them to detect and improve the quality and output of their factories, it's a win-win. So it's not just about replacing them, it's really enabling them. And from the training perspective and talent perspective, what we found is when you think of talent, the ideal talent is somebody who has a understanding of the manufacturing process and has enough digital DNA and really understands how to deploy these products at scale using agile capabilities and understand software a lot more. Well, that unicorn doesn't exist, or it's very hard to find. So you can't look for perfection out there. You got to either find the best manufacturing brains that have an aptitude for digital and train them in that, or bring the inquisitive digital minds that want to work on the shop floor and understand how it all gets made. Really, it takes a village to make this happen. So marrying multiple different skill sets in a team is what we've found as the way to get started versus just waiting for the perfect talent or train everybody to a certain level. And training, last but not the least, as we're rolling this out, requires persistence, requires communication with great frequency and simplicity, so everybody is able to truly take advantage of this without feeling like, this is skies falling.
Yeah, and you mentioned how it takes, you didn't say this, but it takes an ecosystem both within the organization and externally to make this happen. Sure. You guys are all clearly on the vanguard and very progressive in the space, working very closely with startups developing technologies and other solutions. Be curious to hear from both perspectives. What are the challenges in working with startups? What have you seen works well? What doesn't? And what sort of advice would you give to startups looking to work and create some real impact at bigger companies with large manufacturing footprints?
So I'll take a pass. I think, the main issue is scale. You look at our factories, we're producing 1 million units, 2 million units out of a factory. So there's this issue of a company taking a risk on new technology. So I think the key is, how do you get a proof of concept in a light manner, right? So you really want to have like a lean startup approach to proving out that technology, but it's hard to break into the shop floor. So I think that's the dilemma of, the goal of every startup is to go at scale, but every big company's just deathly afraid of taking a risk on their scale. So I think it's both parties got to deal with how do we go about doing that in a way that's a win-win.
And how have you seen that from the other side, Amar, as the stuff going into corporates?
Yeah, and I was going to say, I was frame it as, manufacturing is risk averse, and it's understandable because, nobody in manufacturing gets rewarded because they used a shiny new object but missed their production. I've been in and just to be clear, there are other functions where it's perfectly fine. In software development, somebody will come up with a new tool and, okay, you try it, doesn't work, no harm, no foul, you move on to the next thing. I don't think manufacturing thinks that way. So I do think that being able to demonstrate that your real credibility is a big thing. So I think whether you structure it as a pilot, very well-defined parameters, there's a lot of clarity you need to bring to the first implementation and be able to demonstrate that you can deliver. So I think at the end of the day, that's something we are learning on the other side is we can go in there and impress people about our vision and technology, but the first step has to be very credible and help people believe that you're mitigating risk, not adding risk to what they're trying to do.
I would echo all of those points. Definitely, scale, wouldn't be the same in a startup versus a big enterprise. And the importance of getting it right the first time to have that credibility that may be lacking for a big brand name versus startup. Absolutely. And I've seen in some cases it expands the initial breaking the ice cycle sometimes for a startup because they're establishing themselves. At the same time, the benefit that I've found is the desire to make it successful and all the energy that I've seen the startups put in, make it a huge success. And the ability to mold a solution, which you'd have a lot more in a smaller, nimble startup versus a much bigger enterprise, it takes a long time, even if there is that level of partnership. And of course, the cost breaking point, right? The ability to scale at a much more digestible cost and really truly scale fast and try it out is more digestible at the cost and price points that some of these startups offer. The one aspect that also is a consideration point is the ecosystem point. When you partner with an SAP or a Siemens or a PTC, they've got a plethora of products that really give you various pieces of the puzzle of your full manufacturing value chain. Whereas if you work with a startup, you're getting a niche product for a very specific need. And at the end of the day, data needs to connect and be seamlessly leveraged. So that ecosystem benefit is something that can be sometimes a consideration point. But as long as the startups come with a strong API suite and are willing to invest in that, that can also be overcome.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, the need for having APIs. I mean, a lot of startups in this space have ended up in a pilot purgatory, quite frankly. So I don't know what it is. There's always some plant manager that's got a spare $250K laying around. I don't know, but then they can't scale to the rest of the organization. So I think that the point that Amar makes, which is if you're going to do a pilot, you need to be very clear about two things: what the endpoints are and how does it scale. Because just because somebody paid $250,000 for a pilot doesn't mean that's the same price point per integration at scale. So I think you have to be realistic about that and have a plan.
Great.
Yep. And one last point I'd mention in terms of the plan is, whether it's one's career success or a sales team that's trying to sell a product from a big enterprise, the need of a sponsor matters. And I think having strong sponsors in any company is the only way I've found startups being able to, Karen's point, get out of the pilot purgatory. You have to have strong sponsorship somewhere.
Find the Kevins, find the Deepikas.
Absolutely.
All right, we have 5 minutes left. Let's go round the horn one time. Talk to me about what's next for you. So how are you next going to drive this space, and what are you focused on and passionate about? What gets you fired up about doing next in digital manufacturing? let's start with Karen, because I know you have a fund. Tell me a little bit more about your fund and what your plan is for fund.
Yeah, no, Exposition is a early stage fund focused specifically on the digital transformation of industry and advanced manufacturing, supply chain, logistics. One of the areas that I've been spending a lot of time on recently is in this whole supply chain and logistics space. I have never heard more discussion about it than I have had during this time of COVID. And companies that are both providing visibility end to end on the supply chain and then tools to help you resolve crises are kind of interesting. So companies like Elementum or Forkite, P44 on the logistics side. You know, one of the things that we're seeing with COVID is an acceleration in e-commerce and in short haul logistics. So I've been looking at things in that digitization of short haul logistics. And in the digital warehouse space, because I think that's required, because everybody wants, when they order it online, they want it in an hour. So you need to have more flexible warehousing, and there are lots of interesting technology plays there. So those are some of the areas that I'm super excited about. But overall, I mean, I do think we're in a time where manufacturing moves from this cost center to something, as Kevin has talked about, that can be positively positioned both on the ESG front as a competitive advantage with customers front. So I think it's a great time for manufacturing and more domestic manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Amar? We have 2 minutes left, so let's make it.
Yeah, look, I think it's connecting the dots, and we are focused on the factory floor. I think, I always believe change happens slowly and then suddenly, and that, things start, momentum builds up, and then all of a sudden, everything connects. And for us, it's connecting all the way from, engineering all the way to the warehouse and sort of making that a whole digital fabric. I think what I look forward to is, we all know what to do. It just takes a lot of work to do it. And I'm seeing that emerge. And that's what I'm looking forward to, is really transforming the factory floor and then proving Kevin wrong. Final assembly, they will not be human beings in the future. I guarantee that.
We'll pull the panel together in 3 years and see who's right.
Yeah, exactly.
5 years, maybe 10. Deepika.
Yeah. Excited about the advent of 5G and how that enables some adaptive manufacturing on our shop floors. Exploring that and interested to see more.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Kevin?
Yeah, and just, to close it is, manufacturing is here. It's where value is created. So I think we're finally figuring out as a nation is we have to have manufacturing and localize. We're making a big bet on it. But what I think in the future, we need public policy. We need politicians that actually know something about manufacturing, because right now they know nothing. And then we need educators to kind of understand what you all understand on this, of really getting the workforce of the future that's going to be there for us.
That's great. That's great. Any last final thoughts from everyone? Because we are coming up on time. All right. I would like to thank you all very much for being on this panel. I'll remind everyone that there is a networking capability within this event. So if you want to meet some of the folks, if you want to hear about Exposition Ventures or meet any of the folks on the panelists, please do so and reach out. We have, I believe, a 15-minute break, and then we're doing a couple round tables where you have a chance to ask some of us some questions about the space or what you heard today. So thank you again very much for joining, all of you, both panelists and attendees.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.